Uh,
Let me know when you're ready.
why don't you go ahead?
Okay. Good morning and happy Advocacy Day, everyone, and welcome back. Can you hear me, Kathy? Just to make sure.
Yes,
Okay, thank you.
yes.
My name is Ayan Elmi. I'm the Civic Engagement and Advocacy Coordinator with Washington Multicultural Services Link. My visual description are that I'm an East African woman in her mid-30s, wearing a cultural floral covering and a dress. Today's topics are all about protecting our services and our rights. Just few reminders for today. Please use the Q&A box for any questions you have today. It can be found in the More menu, depending on how you're accessing Zoom. We will prefer you only use the chat today for only important links and for those that need it for accessibility reasons. We again prefer you use the Q&A for questions, and we encourage you to avoid long discussions in the chat because they can be distraction to the meeting. We also need you to click on the globe icon today in Zoom and select if you want to hear today's program either in English or Spanish, as this will help our interpretation services and it will help us all hear each speaker clearly. So if you're English speaker, please make sure you go to the globe and you click English so that way you can hear everybody. And if you need Spanish, you go to Spanish room and mute original audio. That way you can only hear the Spanish room. We also need you, I apologize, hold on. And then lastly, we want to encourage all our speakers today, including myself, to speak slower so that our interpretation services correctly relay your words. With that, I we were supposed to pass it to either Emily. Is Emily in the room yet or now?
I have not seen Emily this morning. Let me see.
And if that's the case, I'll have to pass it to Kathy. You're the next person.
There we go. Thank you so much. So I'm Kathy Murahashi. I'm the public policy specialist at the Arc of Washington. And welcome, everybody. We're so glad you're here. This is our first day of Advocacy Day. Yay! It's going to be a fast and furious session. We look forward, hopefully, to do some good work. I'm going to give you a little bit of an overview about what to expect this session. Just a heads up, our legislator that was supposed to be coming this morning is ill, so Representative Taylor will not be joining us. She's hopefully will join us at one of our other upcoming advocacy days soon. So can you all see my screen, the PowerPoint? Is that what you're seeing?
Yeah.
Yes,
Perfect.
Kathy.
Okay. So today's topic is protect our services and our rights. How do we ensure that we have the services we need and that our rights to live in the community are protected? This is a very critical time for our rights and for our services. There's a lot on the line, particularly coming up this legislative session. And I'll give a little some reasons why here. So in the background, we're in Washington State, but a lot is happening at our federal Washington, D.C. this last year. I'm sure you're all aware if you're following any kind of advocacy. At the federal level, there was a big bill. It's called H.R. 1. Sometimes it's called the Big Beautiful Bill. We don't think it's so beautiful, but that bill happened last summer, and it makes significant cuts and changes to Medicaid, which our folks, most of our folks with IDD depend on Medicaid for their services and their medical care. There were also cuts to SNAP. SNAP is our food program, and it changes how that program works somewhat. They're also trying to shut down our Department of Education. So you may be reading a lot in the news about what's happening with that They've cut some of the grants. They're trying to move all the programming elsewhere. And the concern around that is the expertise and the enforcement of IDEA, which is our special education law. Later this session, we're going to have an advocacy day that focuses on education. And we're going to spend a lot of time talking about IDEA and its history because it started here in Washington. And the piece there that we're really concerned is that protection of rights, the enforcement of IDEA, so that if something happens to the student at our state level, that if you have to make a complaint that goes federally, that there's somebody there to enforce it. There's also threats to how Section 8 works. There's threats to our disability infrastructure. That includes things like Disability Rights Washington, which is paid for through some of that, the Disability Act at the federal level, or our developmental disabilities councils. Now, that they've not had cuts at this point in time, but there's been several threats. And again, we worry about threats to Social Security. So all those things, those are the things that are happening in the background as our legislators come to Olympia now. And why that's important is because a lot of the decisions that they have to make, particularly about Medicaid and SNAP, it's like the Congress pushed it down and is forcing the states to decide how they're going to make those cuts. They gave some direction, but they really are pushing down, and our legislators have to make the tough choices, which is very difficult, and we're concerned about that. So here it comes, this session, here it comes that they're going to have to make these really terrible decisions. And on top of that, we come in, there's a great big hole. They're pushing down, we're thinking about billions with a B of cuts, billions of dollars in cuts. So, how big is it? Well, it depends on who you ask. And how they're going to deal with it, well, that depends on who you ask too. But here's what they're coming in. Did I miss a slide? I think I missed a slide. Just a sec. Maybe I didn't put it in. I just didn't say it. So some of the things that they're really having to think about, just a sec. Yeah, think about is, they've got inflation is up, caseloads are up, revenue is down, and then we've got all these background federal things that they're making tough decisions. So, and there's really, the choices are not very nice. Make cuts or raise taxes, and neither of those options are popular. So that's the atmosphere that our legislators are walking into this week. And, when we talk about those things, it's a little bit like the budget. The budget is the big thing. It's like if you're making your own family budget, it's like, oh, things cost more, that you have another kid in your home, so you've got more people to feed. And, let's see, inflation, revenue, and you're making less money. So you've got to, if you're making your own family budget, those three things make it really hard. And it's like, oh, it's really, we're feeling squeezed. Well, our legislators are feeling that squeeze. And so they're going to be making really tough choices this session. And these are the things that we're most concerned about. And we'll talk more in detail about these things. We're concerned about whether they maintain eligibility for DD services, because one of the things that is being tossed around is, should they narrow the eligibility to have a waiver? So that, I think right now you only need maybe one out of a list of things to be eligible. And now they're saying, well, maybe you need to have 4, 5, or 6 of those things to be eligible for a waiver. And what that would do is, some people that have been eligible may no longer be eligible, and people coming in would not be eligible either. So that would be, that would mean some people could lose their waiver. The other thing we're concerned about is preserving personal care hours. Again, they could change what they call the algorithm, the formula for how you get personal care hours. So again, it could be, if you have, they could change it, and I'm making this up, number wise. If you need 3 now they're going to require that you need 4 or 5 activities of daily living to be eligible for personal care, but also that could reduce the number of hours that you receive as well. So those are very scary things. The other thing that could happen, that they would consider, reducing the rates that our providers receive. So our personal care providers, or our employment providers, or other providers, if they pay them less, that reduces the budget, but it also makes it more difficult to get providers, right? And makes that really difficult. So those are things that we're really worried about this session. Again, and we're also worried about that background, the background noise around our rights and our services. So some of the messaging that we're talking about, big picture words. If you're a legislator, what do we need to know? We said, protect our disability services. Please protect our services. Protect community living, our rights to live in the community. A lot of the federal cuts that come at the expense of the community, but protected institutional care. And that's concerning. So we want to make sure that we continue to have the right for services and to live in the community. And then our disability rights again. So that is what, the message. If they want a short answer, this is that: protect our disability services, protect community, and protect disability rights. Let's see. So, and we know what happens when we have these kinds of cuts. We know individuals don't get the care they need. They end up being isolated. They end up in a hospital or jail. Families have to quit work. They go into financial crisis. They're separated. And agencies can't adequately serve new people. They go out of business. And students don't get the appropriate education, are isolated and restrained, or they get sent out of state. So we know when we make these kinds of cuts, it causes crisis that costs more in the long run. So we really need to be sure that we protect these things. So, some language we talk about, individuals need these services to live. The state really has a moral obligation to provide care for this population. And our folks get services from many different places. We get all our DDA services, but a lot of our folks also get SNAP. And they also, you may get, things from healthcare. So many places, housing and different. So a variety of places they get our services. And what happens is all those things get cut. And for a person with disability, if you're getting services for a bunch of places, that means you're getting multiple cuts. just to you. So it's not like you're just getting one thing cut. It's like you're getting a whole bunch of things cut. So those equal cuts across state agencies are really not equitable for our folks. Again, cuts cause crisis. So these are some things that you can be talking to your legislators about. We'll review those again. Sean will later. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing.
Kathy, do we have time for some questions?
Yeah, we do.
Okay, perfect. I have a couple in the chat and a couple in the Q&A. Just a reminder, if you have questions, please add them to the Q&A. So the first one I'm seeing is from Heather. Can you please go over caregiver hours? I'm not sure if Heather wants to expand on that question or...
So I think I heard you. You're probably worried about having your caregiver hours cut. Is that correct? So understand what I'm talking about now has not happened yet. These cuts have not been made at this point of time. So for now, we're good. And that's why we need your advocacy so they don't happen. So our goal is that these cuts do not happen. So for now, breathe a little bit, but we need your advocacy going forward to help protect those hours. Okay?
And is that the same for DDA hours? That was the other question.
Yes.
Yeah.
The same.
Yeah. Okay.
These changes have not occurred yet, but this is why we're concerned and how we want to make sure that we continue to protect them. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you, Kathy. And then how do we protect Social Security?
Social Security, I think that's with your congressional delegation. Continue to write or talk to your congressional delegation. Again, that is not something that has occurred yet. That's just in the background. We just hear a lot of noise about it, and threats. That's probably one that is a lesser concern than other things, because Social Security is very popular. What we may see, though, that is concerning is changes to rules around Social Security, particularly around disability. That can be impactful for us. And we've already seen some changes that, had been made about people living at home and in kind care, and making it more difficult for individual folks living at home. But again, there's not been any direct cuts to Social Security, and we continue to hope that will just, again, it would be very unpopular to do that. So
a quick one, the slides, they're going to go up on the website. Is that correct?
we are recording this session, and I can put the slides up as well if that's helpful.
Yeah, cool. Okay. And what happens when hours are cut and a person's needs can no longer be met? Is the backup plan going to be RHCs?
That's what we're concerned about, is that people will have to make really tough choices. And it'll depend on the person's circumstances. That's why we worry about people being homeless, ending up in the hospital, ending up in care, more restrictive care. Yeah. Those are really good talking points to talk to legislators about, is to say, what's the backup plan for these folks? And say, how can we, what am I supposed to do? Again, because the RHC is the only entitlement that we have. So, yeah.
One more. Could they reduce the amount that is taken from the DDA funds? For instance, payment is 21 to caregivers, but 35 is taken from funds. That's from Layla.
Say that again, please.
Yeah, and Layla, maybe you want to expand on this. Could they reduce the amount that is taken from the DDA funds? For instance, payment is 21 to caregivers, but 35 is taken from funds.
Oh, for the administrative
Yeah,
piece.
right. The
I mean,
administration. Yeah, I always get this letter
yeah,
that because
I mean,
caregivers
that's
get
something,
only 21 of that 35 or something,
right?
and it's already so low, right?
You, so those are administrative costs. Yeah, legislators could look at that, but those are also collectively bargained. So those are going to be harder. Um, it'll be more difficult to make that kind of a cut, I would expect, but those are things to discuss.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Thank you, Kathy.
Yeah.
Kathy, do you want to follow the schedule or are we changing up since we don't have Representative Taylor?
Why don't you go to the next item that was after Jamila?
Okay, and on behalf of WMSL, Hodan is not able to speak. She's busy with something else. So even though she's on the meeting, she's doing something emergency. So our self-advocacy teacher, Mahad, will be giving the information on our two issues. So Mahad, when you're ready, please go take it away.
Thank you very much, Ayan. And hi, everybody. Good Wednesday morning. Really grateful to be here. For those who don't know me, my name is Mahad or Mahad here. And as Ayan mentioned, I am the self-advocacy educator at the Washington Multicultural Services Link. Uh, Ayan got that down with the exception of the teacher part. I am the educator, but hey, it is what it is, though. So I'm not going to complain. But then again, it's really great. I'm really grateful to be here and to be invited to be speaking on behalf of Hudden. Today, what I want to highlight uh, is is some of the anti-blackness and anti-immigrant rhetoric that's going on when it comes to the overall conversation of disability justice in our communities. So when we talk about disability rights, we also have to talk about race and immigration status, especially with what's going on across the country and even here in our state. Anti-blackness and anti-immigrant systems create additional barriers for families with disabilities, especially Black, African diaspora, and immigrant families. Now, these families want the same things to live, work, learn, and belong in their communities. Unfortunately, however, systems are not neutral. In fact, Black and immigrant families often experience fear of engaging with systems, language barriers, mistrust due to past harm and trauma, as well as being ignored, delayed, or denied services, these critical services. So, even within the disability system, unfortunately, not everybody is treated the same. Black families are more likely to be over surveilled and under supported, dismissed when raising concerns, push towards segregated or institutional settings, and it's pushed towards segregated or institutional settings. Immigrant families may avoid services due to fear of misinformation, face language and documentation barriers, and be wrongly told those services will affect their immigration status. And the result of all these and the result of all this is children miss their early intervention, families become isolated, and rights exist on paper, but they're not put into practice. And we also need to name that Black and immigrant families with disabilities often do not receive the same level or quality of services as their white counterparts with the same disabilities. They receive the same they have the same diagnosis, same eligibility. However, the outcomes are different. This is not about blaming individuals. It's about systems that were not built with equity in mind. So what needs to change? Well, I believe in the saying, to truly protect the right to live in the community, we must address inequities within the disability system itself. And how do we do that? First off, invest in community-based, culturally grounded organizations like Washington Multicultural Services Link. We serve not just Black families, but we also serve families from the African diaspora, as well as immigrant families as well, and provide as well as providing services in families' languages, because language plays a role not just in narrative, but also in how we receive these services as well. and combine, and if you combine that with real communication, mission accomplished. And finally, train providers and organizations on anti-Blackness and immigrant justice. And also include Black and immigrant families as decision makers, not just participants. Like we can't just have a seat at the table. We need to like really be more active when it comes to like the decision making process and the policy making process. And finally, protect community living, not institutions, and make sure access is equal for everybody. And I would like to conclude with a quote here that says, "And equity means more than access on paper. It means families with the same disabilities receive the same support, regardless of race, language, or immigration status." And the reason why I mention that is because given the fact that we're dealing with lots of racist policies, whether both here in our state and across the country, like we have to continue to invest in ourselves and in our community members in order to create that thriving community for all, especially for Black and immigrant families, both today and as we move forward. So thank you for having me, and I'm really grateful to be here. Ayan, Kathy, back to
Thank
you.
Thank you
thank
so
you.
much.
Yeah, that was amazing. And do we go to Noah right now, Kathy?
Yeah, let's just see if did anybody have any questions? Thank you
Oh, I
so much
apologize. Yes.
for sharing, Ahad. That was
You got it.
amazing. I know these are issues that are concerning to everybody right now, especially right. We know that your communities have been facing this for a long time, but we know right now it's particularly difficult, and we're really concerned. So,
We're really
were there
grateful to
any
be here. Thank you.
questions?
Hi, this is Christy. There are a couple questions. They don't directly relate to the last presentation, but I can go ahead and read them out if you'd like.
Mhm. Sure.
Okay. All right. From Darcy, this is probably a question for better times. How do we position ourselves so that we aren't always the first sacrificed?
Uh, Darcy, that is a great question. Um, I think um, I think that's an ongoing conversation. Stacy and I have been talking a lot about DDCS really needs a plan, and we need to be prioritized. We always seem to be get the Band-Aid, right? Band-Aid solutions rather than creating an overarching plan that helps us weather times like these better. I think that's something that we need to continue to talk to legislators about. We just were melded with HCLA, Home and Community Living Administration. I'll get that acronym down yet. And you know what? One of the things that they're, what used to be called ALTSA, the Aging and Adult System, about 10 years or so ago, when Governor Inslee came on, he decided to make that a priority, and they created a really cool plan. And guess what? They have weathered things through the years. They've always gotten the things on their agenda. They've always been prioritized. We need that for DDCS. And we really need to be talking about that so that we have an overarching plan. Yeah.
Thank you, Kathy. This is Christy again. What is the difference between determining eligibility for the waiver and personal care hours? This is from Christine.
Hi, Christine. They're really two separate things, and they have their own criteria. So for the waiver, it's whether you what they call whether you meet institutional level of care, and there's specific priority criteria for that. And again, they would change the criteria. How many of the things do you meet or not meet? And that would get you on the waiver. Our personal care hours are not actually a DDCS service. That actually sits over in kind of the broader home and community-based community first choice, which isn't just people with IDD. It's people with all sorts of disabilities. And that has, we talked, those hours are based on the care assessment. So there's kind of two parts. there's the eligible, are you eligible for personal care hours, and are you, the care assessment determines how many hours you are. They have very similar the care assessment is based on what they call activities of daily living and how much you do. They have very similar things on both of those things, but they are different. So I hope that helps.
Thank you, Kathy. This is Christy. Will Congress pass SSI Savings Penalty Elimination Act into law? This is from Glenn.
We hope so. We don't know. I think that will be require us to continue to advocate at the congressional level. Hopefully, yes.
Thank you. Okay. From Michelle, how are some ways we can reach out to marginalized families in our daily practices as providers and/or advocates? And how do we talk about this issue with legislators? What can they do to improve service to BIPOC segments of the IDD community?
Leon, do you want to answer that one?
I think at the end of the day, similar to what Mahad said, just making sure that legislation or laws and everything that people are trained, because we're all humans, we all have bias, and whether we're subconscious or not. So just not assuming what you think of the families and actually involving them in the beginning. A lot of times families that don't speak the language, they don't know their rights. Like Hodan and I always do multiple community, and Mahad and I actually will be doing it next month or even in March, I believe, multiple different meetings where learning about their rights and what Kathy was just talking about. What's personal care? What's a waiver? Like, what's the difference? Where it come from? Does it come from Medicaid? Because there's like confusion of when you have the long-term care calling you rather than dealing with the DDA. So just making sure that when they have a DDA case manager, that the DDA case manager actually explains, hey, this is the steps, this is what you get, this is what you get, this is what you have, this is the age that, this much age, this is what your child gets when they are 18. This is what you need to do, because a lot of times the families that we work with, they don't even know about school to work until we let them know. They don't know about like job coaches. What is that? When do you start doing that? They don't know about a lot of things like transitioning, like to school. Like once they finish high school, they don't get to know it until last minute, literally when the child either turned 18 or their final senior. So just getting access to resources, knowing things ahead of time, and actually explaining to interpreters, not just to interpret, but actually understand what they're interpreting. Because I feel like sometimes IEPs, DDA, they need their own BHDs. And a lot of times translating that person to this person back and forth, that family might not fully understand the lingos, the words, all the acronyms that we're all using in these meetings and other meetings. So just making sure that the families feel welcome, they feel they're included in their child's decisions making, and just that they are building relationship with the families. Because a lot of times I feel like we're the bridge between them, and a lot of times the case managers or any sort of support the families are getting, they don't have a relationship with whoever they're getting it from. Whereas a lot of other clients I have of different races, they have their number of their case manager. They're able to speak with them because there's no language barrier. So I think the language barrier is the biggest issue, like Mahat said. But at the end of the day, just making sure that they feel involved. I think that's the biggest issue that a lot of families speak on. So I hope that answers your question.
Thank you. And Mahad put a couple things in the chat regarding this as well. It's all about educating our community members about the right services and resources that are available to them. It's also up to us to ensure these services and resources have the most equitable access points for our communities.
Agree.
And I have one more question from Diane. Why does it take over a year for DSHS/DDS to process where a client will reside?
Yeah, I don't know if I can answer that adequately. I think there's a lot of steps involved. Are you talking about going from into supported living, or are you talking about from being eligible for DDCS in general?
In this case, he's always been in supportive living. He got aspirated in the adult family home and was sent to the hospital, then to Shoreline excuse me, been to a rehab center November 2024. And DSA just seemed to be dragging their feet with the process to place him. For example, the assessment was done in June. We have just now completed the assessment so it can go, it went back and forth for review, and then there was no communication between June and September. And then there were corrections made, and then nothing between September and this month. And then there were 3 consent forms that were
Lord.
scatteredly sent out, which also held up the process. And that's totally ridiculous. This particular client has been in the system for ages, but for some reason, over a year, and we haven't even, they just now started the process to look for supportive living, for community living, etc.
Yeah. That's incredibly frustrating. I don't have all the answers to that. Maybe we can talk after online. If you want to drop us an email and we can talk about it. I think there's a lot of barriers there. I know that we don't have enough placements, which makes things difficult, and that they always want to make sure that the placements are a good fit. But again, we're hearing that there are long delays, and that's really unfortunate. So we can talk offline. So thank you.
Just wanted to read a quick chat from Terry. There's many steps. Sometimes it's up to the client to find a home or apartment. It's up to DDCS to find a provider. There's assessments and introductions, etc. It's a long process. Once my daughter received the core waiver, it was actually 3 years before she moved into her home.
Wow.
Thank you. Thanks for sharing that, Terry. So, okay. Thank you, Ayan, for sharing, and our other speaker as well. Thank you for sharing that. And I think we can go to the next speaker.
Yeah, Noah, when you're ready, take it away.
Yeah, thank you. Hello, my name is Noah Seidel. I use he, him pronouns, and just a quick image description is I am a 35-year-old white male with black hair, and then my background is like the DD Ombuds logo and the DD Ombuds color, and I'm wearing black glasses. So just a quick introduction about the DD Ombuds is we were created by the legislature in 2016, so about 10 years ago, to be an independent office that helped individuals and families if there's complaints or concerns about their DDA or now DDCS services, and to recommend systemic changes and work with legislatures, community members, and state agencies on systemic changes and individual complaints. So things like finding providers or a long transition process is also something that the DD Ombuds can work with individuals and families if they're experiencing that or transitioning out of institutional settings to community settings. So I will also put a link to the DD Ombuds website in the chat. And we have our complaint process online, and also people can call. So just want to give that introduction. But today I'm going to be talking about House Bill 1390, which would eliminate the Community Protection Program, which is a DDCS waiver. So currently, the Community Protection Program is a waiver service that if a person is deemed eligible, which means that they meet criteria, then they have to be on this community protection program waiver. They can't utilize any other waiver services. So they could still get community first choice, but they couldn't receive a waiver. And some background about community protection. So community protection was created after there was an incident where it was alleged that a woman set fire to her adult family home. So they created this waiver for people that would need more support to keep themselves safe, but also to keep the community safe. So there's different eligibility requirements if somebody is being violent or they could harm somebody sexually or other reasons. People could they get reviewed, and if they meet what they call community protection criteria, then that is the waiver that they are put on. And then there's supposed to be plans for therapy, for work, to then graduate from this program and not have that level of supervision. And then there's also restrictions that are placed on people in the community protection program. So the developmental disability ombuds, we received calls and concerns from people who were in the program that they were not graduating, that they had these restrictions that were unrelated for why they were in the program. People had concerns, for example, like um, they're not allowed to go on the internet, or if their family sends them pictures, sometimes they're not able to see pictures of their family. They're not able to have phone conversations with loved ones. They're not able to go participate in community activities of their choice with their staff. So we were getting concerns, and we started looking into the program. And we wrote a report. So on our website, we have a short version, then like a longer version of the report that we called No Way Out. And we called it that because people who were getting placed on this program and then not graduating or leaving the program like it was intended. And some of the things that we saw that made us want to raise concerns were that people at a young age were getting put into the program before they were given the tools on maybe how to get the support that they need. So they were being put in the program at a young age. Um, and then that if they didn't want to be in the program, they couldn't utilize other waiver services. So this program is supposed to be optional. Um, but if your options are be on this waiver or don't receive a waiver at all, that takes away a lot of the choice. And we really value clients' choices on the services that they receive, individual choice. The other kind of problem that we were seeing is that there's very low graduation rate. And I think currently people in the program are typically in the program for about 15 years. So if you think about if you do something to, you know, get help and support, 15 years still seems like a long time before you're ready to graduate from a program or understand what you need to do to leave the program. So the DD Ombuds, we wrote this report. We worked with community members on kind of some changes that might be able to help people. And one thing that we really saw was that repealing community protection is the best solution. There's also a thing called the Community Protection Act, which is for a different population of people. And there was confusion over people in Community Protection Program and Community Protection Act. And people were getting labeled and treated very harmfully and being discriminated against out in the community. And even if you go back to last year, because this bill was there last year, the way legislators were talking about people was very derogatory. And we think it was also people confusing these two programs. So this bill, House Bill 1390, would eliminate the program. DSHS, so DDCS and DSHS, they propose this legislation, so they are in support of this legislation. And they have a plan for how people would transition. So the goal is to not take away any services for adults who need this level of support, and not affect caseloads. And this would allow DDCS providers to serve people in a more person-centered way while removing these harmful and stigmatizing language. So we are working, and we know that there would be a plan to transition people onto the core waiver, to refer them to service, training for service providers for how to support people as they transition to a new waiver. And then for community protection waiver to officially go away, there would still need to be a CMS changes. So the program would still be around for some time while there's changes to the CMS, which is federally oversight. And we know that there are about 280 people currently in the community protection program who this would affect. And we also know, since we've been advocating and DDCS has been working on reviewing people in the program, that graduations numbers have gone up. From 2022, the graduation was around 15 people, to in 2025 there was 37 people. So we know that more people are graduating, and the number of graduations have gone up every year from 2022. So I think, as people are advocating and really looking at how to support people, we're seeing more people are graduating. Um, so right now, the bill, it did die last year, and it's coming back this year. There's some confusion on if it's in the Rules Committee or if it has to go back for a hearing in the House. So my recommendation is, anybody who would want to support this bill, if you have a House member in early learning and human services, to let them know that you support this bill. If it goes back to committee, you want it passed out really quickly. Or if you have a House member in rules, that you want to see it moved out of rules and have a House vote. So those are kind of where it is now. I will be giving updates probably throughout legislative session on this bill as we hear how it's progressing.
Great.
Thank you, Noah. And for the rest of the meeting, I'll pass it to my co-host, Sean. Sean, take it away.
Hello everyone, my name is Sean Latham from Self Advocates in Leadership, or SAIL, and I'm one of your facilitators this year. I'm going to pass it to Stacy Dim to talk about the preservation of records bills.
Thank you, Sean. Hi, everybody. I'm going to talk to you a little bit more about a bill that looks at preserving some historical records that are found at Lakeland Village in Medical Lake, just in Eastern Washington in our state. This bill is really a follow-up to a bill that came out of the Senate last year, Senate Bill 6125. And that created a moratorium on the destruction of these very historical documents and records that date back to the 1890s at Lakeland Village, which everybody knows here, I think, is a residential habilitation center. Lakeland Village started off in 1892 as the Washington School for Defective Youth. That included a means for children and youth who were deaf or blind, and at that time referred to as children who were feeble-minded. Later, the facility was changed to the Center for the Feeble-Minded. And this is all part of our historical record. And again, I apologize for the language, but it is the language that is used in this report. Just as a little background, the current superintendent was preparing some buildings that are due for demolition, and found a lot of really valuable records stored in the attic and in back rooms of the facility, and recognized how critical these documents were for the part of the history of our state, and started on a journey to try to protect those records. And we joined in on that journey. The reports that came out of this bill 6125 are available on our website. I'll put them in the chat. And they're interesting to read if you have a little bit of the history bug. There's some fascinating history that's there. And then it refers you to other ways in which you can learn about more history of this facility. But more importantly, I think it's important for us to recognize how this fits into a larger movement around truth and reconciliation. And you may have heard that term around ways in which communities that have been harmed try to address that harm because it was under the auspice of government policy. So we know that our state, in fact, in the nation from the 1850s to the 1950s, there were campuses that were developed for what were called asylums for the insane and schools for the feeble-minded that were some of the largest public investments in the United States. There were people who numbered in the thousands who were kept in these facilities, and there were towns worth of employees who were employed in these facilities. And I think in order to reconcile the harm that has been done to the developmental disabilities community over 100 years, almost hundreds of years now, we have to preserve some of that history. And so that's why we're so passionate about making sure that the state does not lose track of or destroy those records, and that we have a rolling preservation of records that happen as more and more records either get discovered, are found at other RHCs, or continue to come outside of that over 75 years old time period where we think of things as historical as opposed to sort of private information. So this follow-up bill, well, there's two actually. Now we have a companion bill. So 5863 is the Senate bill, and 2252 is the House bill. The Senate bill was heard yesterday in state government, and the House bill will be heard in state government on Friday. That just extends the moratorium to 2030 for the destruction of these identified records. And just for your information, there are about 1,900 boxes of information and records and documents that have been identified. Only about 250 of those boxes are eligible to go to archives right now. The rest of them are part of the recommendations in those two reports. There are two reports that you'll see. One is led by Archives and DSHS, and the other is an additional report from the University of Washington researchers who didn't feel like the first report really covered sufficiently the ways in which we might explore those records, protect those records, and get more input. For example, the University of Washington said, yes, while there are some oral histories of Lakeland Village and the other RHCs, most of those oral histories came from employees from the state and the facilities. They did not come from people who lived there or from their family members. That's an important oversight when you look at historical preservation. In addition, the patient records, as they're referred to, the individual residence records, are automatically excluded from being placed in archives currently. And what we want to know is, what were the daily lives of residents who were there? Did they get to have access to outside activities? What kind of medical treatment did they experience? Was there medical experimentation, which did happen in those facilities? Were people sterilized before they were allowed to leave? And then what were the opportunities that came from those admissions? So there is a lot here. We think that it's critically important that we don't lose track of this, because it does drive the ability for our state to face how we've provided treatment to people with developmental disabilities over the years and how it influences our current policies. So when we talk about things like, if we don't have access to community-based services, will people have to get access to care in an RHC? Well, that's pretty relevant when you look at the past history and what that might mean for people. So that's a brief summary of a complex historical take on some of the things that we're working on this session, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Sean, before we move on, there were a couple of questions for Noah. Is Noah still here? He may have already left. Let me check.
Yeah, he did say he had to leave at 11.
Yeah, that's what I was going to check. He may have already left. And yeah, I think he's left. Yeah. The questions, and Stacy, do you know the answer to these at all? Is community protection used as an alternative to incarceration by the judicial system?
It is, not formally. It's not a diversion program formally, but it is used as an alternative. Not to our incarceration specifically and always, but certainly we know of people that are in community protection that were diverted from the judicial system and ended up in community protection programs.
Oh,
I think we have somebody who's not on mute. Yeah, sorry.
Make sure I'll see if I can find. Yeah. Okay. That's fixed. Great. Okay.
Again, people are not confined by the court to community protection. They're not ordered into community protection by the court. It's not a formal process.
Oh, we're looking for the bill numbers for Lakeland. I'll put those in the chat in a minute, okay? Thank you.
Okay. So we ready for the next one?
Yeah.
Hello again, I'm up next. Again, my name is Sean Latham, the Policy Coordinator for Self Advocates in Leadership or SAIL, a coalition of people with intellectual and developmental disabilities who works on legislative advocacy to improve people's lives. One of the bills SAIL will be working on this year is House Bill 2319, sponsored by Representative Daria Far-Iver. This is a bill to remove the word school from the residential habilitation centers, or as we call them, DD institutions. Originally, these developmental disabilities were not only residential places, but also schools for children living there. But in the last century, we established an Office of Superintendent of Public Instruction and allowed kids with disabilities to attend schools in their areas. This is how it should be, because kids do better when they receive education in their local communities. We also made strong efforts to ensure kids get support in their communities and don't have to reside in institutions to receive services. Therefore, we strongly believe that the word schools should be removed from all DD institutions to avoid the public perception of the purpose of these institutions. Last year, when we were trying to close Rainier and Yakima Valley, some legislators used the excuse that these were schools, so they didn't want to close quote institutional schools unquote because of the kids. Now some of these legislators were not aware these institutions were no longer used schools, and there are very few kids, if any, in each one. Other legislators probably are using the term as a way to convince the public to keep these institutions open. We feel that removing the term school is just one more little step we can do to get us to a point of shutting down the institutions. Yes, we recognize this bill will not change the core function of these places or close them down this year. But we feel like this is a good step to do. Help us advocate for House Bill 2319. Thank you.
I just have to on okay. So I'm gonna have you put the
I'm going to turn it over to one of my SAIL members next, Courtney Tom, to talk about civil rights.
ready, Connie?
Thank you, Sean. Hi, my name is Tony Thom. I live in Tenaya, Washington. I live in the 35th Legislative District. And how long I've been with SEAL? That is a question that I want to know because, one, I first started in SEAL when they did a workshop at the People's Special Convention 1 year. And I've been with them ever since. I love living in the community, and the best part of living in the community is I do a lot with recreational events, and I am involved in advocacy and various recreational events. I've been a part of a cheer team for Sonic Elite Olympia, cheer abilities teams. Hmm. And the reason why it's important to be respected is treat people the way that you want to be treated. That's a model that I use so people can be respected and others can be respected. And the reason why people deserve to get the community protection program is because it's overly restrictive and they get their rights taken away. And that's not how we should live in the community, especially in a program. And the main reasons that people in the community protection program can't even go to a Tim Tebow Foundation prom called Night to Shine. And another reason, they can't play all-way video games or have access to the community. And they don't have privacy because they have to do mandatory room checks. And that's not okay either. People don't have the freedom in their own bedrooms. And the community protection program totally forbids relationships. I don't think that's right. The program and any little mistakes teach them in the program. Self-awareness and leadership is supporting the community protection program 1390. And any bills that gives us more rights and freedom. I believe that freedom comes from living in the community and receiving the support we deserve to live to stay there. Needed to stay there. We deserve to have our civil rights. And our voices to be heard and how we live our lives. Nothing about us without us. Thank you. So any questions for me?
Well, yeah, thank you. I'm gonna do
Next, I'm going to turn it over to Kathy for a look at the bills and budget this year.
Great. Thank you, Sean. I'm going to share my screen again. I'm going to go straight to our bill tracker today so that you can see how to get to our information. And I just put the link into the chat box. Hold on, and I need to fix it so I can see you guys again. How about that? Alrighty. So if you go to our webpage and you click on the link, you'll see this page. It has 3 different things. There are hearings, budget side by side, and bills of interest. So I'm going to do the bills of interest first. And we talked about some of the bills, so that should make it a little bit easier. But let me make this a little bit bigger so you can see better. Can you all see that now? So when you click on that, you're going to come up to our bills of interest, and it's a giant spreadsheet that you can go to. What I want you to pay attention to is there's 3 tabs at the bottom of this. This is the main one. The first page is really the bills that we at the Arc of Washington are following most closely and actively working on. The second tab is bills that are ones that we're not really actively working on, but they relate to our folks, sometimes directly, sometimes indirectly. they may be like, there's a couple of housing bills that aren't specific to people with IDD, but they may be impacted there. So no, that's there. And also the last one is the session goes along, there's a tab for dead bills. So as bills die, they'll move over there, and that should, so we can keep track of those, because sometimes they come back in a different year or later in a session. So anyway, let's start with the bills of interest today. And today our topic was civil rights. These first bills are budget bills. So these are the bills, these are the supplemental budget bills. So last year was the long session and they put out a budget. This year they're coming back and tweaking that budget from last year. And these are the numbers. They've had hearings. Let's see, today is the 14th. The supplemental budget here has a hearing today at 4. The capital budget also has a hearing tomorrow, the House capital budget. The Senate budget had one yesterday, and the Senate capital budget had one on Monday. So they're all moving along. And, those hearings are like, there's a million people in them and you get like 30 seconds to speak. So it's usually, this is what I like, this is what I don't like, and people move on. But it's important. We were happy to see that there were people with disabilities commenting on the budget last night. So that's great. So let's talk a couple of these bills we've already seen. So you can use this chart. Notice that on the left side's the bill number. You can use those. You can click on those and it'll take you right to the bill page. And that's super helpful. So if you want to sign in or testify on the bill, that will take you to the page where you can do that. Stacy already talked about the preservation of records bill. So I'm going to skip that one for now. 2200 is a bill that increases access to data related to the safety and stability of residential settings for individuals with IDD. So what it's going to do is it's like a look back for, I think, over 3 years, 2 years. I'm not sure exactly how many years, to see, they're looking at really specific things like how many times people went to the hospital, how many times were the police called, and tracking that data and creating a dashboard for all settings. So it would be RHCs, it would be residential settings, adult family homes, etc. And it would be in a place that once the report is done, that you could go and look and see what's happening. I think everybody thinks, it will make things a little bit more transparent. It may cost some money. And one of the things we're hearing from legislators is that anything that costs money this year isn't going to go anywhere. So that they're in a mode that they're cutting. So we'll see. We don't think it's a bad thing. And Sean talked about the renaming bill. So there again, you can just click on that if you want to comment or send information to your legislator about that. It had a hearing yesterday. This bill 23550, if you'll notice, Representative Farvar has a lot of bills that she's really put out there. She's really been working hard for our folks. And this is another one of her bills this year. Increasing transparency regarding RHC's compliance with certain federal requirements. So I think what this bill does is when if an RHC gets a kind of a ding, that if the federal government says, hey, you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing, they have to give notice to the residents there, I believe, and what their options are. So that is that bill. So it's a transparency, again, another transparency bill. Here is the bill that the repealing the community protection program. So we're watching that. Here's another one of Representative Farivar's bills 2415 concerning unexpected fatalities of residents of DSHS. So what it would do is if people unexpectedly pass away in RHCs, and I believe in residential, that there has to be a review of that. And there's a lot of information about that if you read the bill. And we think that's a good idea. We should know what happens. Education, 1795. This is a bill we've been looking at for quite some time, over several years. It's addressing restraint or isolation of students in public schools. It's a bill that came last year and it's come back. It didn't pass, but they brought it up. It had a hearing on Monday, which we are glad for. From what I understand, and Ramona probably knows this better, this bill will probably not move forward exactly the way it is. They will probably narrow it a little bit, talking maybe about preschoolers. But we're hoping to make some progress on it. This is one of those things that keeps coming back, and we keep working on and try to find a way to make it move forward. In healthcare, there are two bills around dental care at RHCs. 2202 establishes a dental care pilot at Rainier RHC. I believe it would allow people to go in, spend the night using respite and have their teeth done and then come out. What we learned, I believe, from DSHS is actually, we probably didn't know that, so not at Rainier, but at some of the other RHCs, that you can already do that, but people just don't know they can have dental care done when you have respite there. And then 2314 concerns dental care. It expands it to beyond Rainier. We think what happened is the first bill was just Rainier, and then it's the same sponsor decided to make it all the RHCs. So, we know that dental care is a real issue for folks and having access. Whether this is the answer, we don't know. It'll be interesting to see as things move forward. 2230 is a bill that Community Residential Services Association brought forward. So if you live in supported living, there are a lot of audits and monitoring and things that happen. And it happens through various different agencies. The DSHS and RCS, and I can't even tell you what all the acronyms are in those cases, but it's many agencies. How about that? And that these audits and so forth happen several times a year, and they ask for different agencies ask for the same information. And it takes a lot of time, and they have energy each time. And what this bill does is says, hey, can you guys share your information so you don't have to do the same thing 3 times a year for different things? Can we just do it once? And can you share the information? So, and it's the exact same from free. This does not impact monitoring of making sure people are safe or anything like that. This is just like paperwork. That doesn't impact the care of the person. And with all these different things, it actually takes away the care because they have to focus on the paperwork. So this bill would help to streamline some of that. We think it's pretty great bill. And it had a hearing yesterday. It's 2230. And lastly, 2337 is concerning the training requirements for individual providers caring for a family member. Now, this bill does not talk about parent provider. That's a whole different topic. This is for your grandparent, your uncle, or, your sibling. And we had a bill, I think last year, so that said that they don't have to take the full 70-hour training. They can just do 30. That's great. But what got tagged on at the end was that they had to do continuing education, 12 hours per year. And there were a couple of problems with that. First of all, that time they did not have enough curriculum, relevant curriculum to really make that happen. So because you can't take the same thing every year. The other thing is for family members, that's a lot. It's a lot to have to manage. So the original bill right now, it stands that it is voluntary. So if you want to take your family member to take classes, they can, and they'll get paid for it. That's great. We want it to stay that way. The bill says that like in 2027, it would be mandatory. It means it would be required. And what this bill does is says, just leave it voluntary and don't take the date away of making it mandatory. So that is that bill. There's some other bills that you may be interested in on the second page. Most of them are the same. There's a guardianship bill that we don't know a lot about. It's got some plus and minus. It's mostly tweaking the previous bill. Some of these are same. Yeah, there's several education bills. One about transportation for people on IEPs. Let's see. There's a little bit of concern. People are concerned about 5969. It sounds good, but there's some concerns around whether this bill is equitable, about fulfilling high school and beyond plans requirements with individualized education program transition plans. Like you could use one or the other. We have some concerns there. There's the restraint and isolation. There's a couple of healthcare bills that are interesting. One concerns patient advocates that would require patient advocate at all hospitals. There's one about durable medical equipment exempting from sales tax. There's the two REC. There's one about expanding access to treatment for PANDA or PANS. That's a specific diagnosis. There's one about medically tailored meals that DSHS is following. One is preventing reduction to pediatric primary care and behavioral health. There's a few housing ones. Some are these are more around taxes and exemptions from things that you may be interested in. Here's one here, 2280, that we're a little concerned about, that would allow legislators to have access to any facilities, one thing, owned and operated by the state. So that would be RHCs, SOLAs, and ones that contract. So that would be supported living in other places or licensed, and that would make adult family homes where they would have access to them at any time they wanted. And we're concerned that that may really interfere in some circumstances with people's privacy. Do you want a legislator to come anytime they want to your house? So we have some concerns about that. We understand the need for them. We want them to see different settings and understand how they work, but there's some questions about that. Another one about property taxes. This one, again, it's not us, but directly, but encouraging permanent supportive housing, transitional housing. Don't know much about that. This one's kind of one that we think is kind of important, 6036. So foster parents that care for individuals with IDD, if the foster parent wants to continue to care for the person in their home after they turn 18, if there's more than one person that they're caring for and getting paid to be cared for, so maybe often foster parents have more than one foster child. What happens is if they have more than one, they would have to become licensed as an adult family home. They just can't continue to do. And that's really problematic because those rules are really tight and there's a lot of things required that are not typical home things. And these are people's homes. And so this would make an exception for foster parents that are caring for somebody 18 to former foster care providers from adult family. They don't have to be licensed as adult family home. So we think that's important because we've seen cases where the person has to change, has to be moved out from really what has become their family because the foster parents can't fulfill the requirements to be an adult family home. We've talked about those. There's one bill, also a bill about strengthening the financial stability of people with and children, youth, and families. So children 18 to 21 that are stay in foster care, again, foster care. Right now, if they get SSI, that money is taken from them and used to pay for their care. This bill would allow them to keep it in an ABLE account. They could create a savings account for the individual that they could use or be administered for them. Okay, I think most of these others we've had, and you can look it through. I think so. I'm just going to go back one thing, and I'm just going to show you one more thing. The budget side by side, so you can go in there and see what the governor's budget does. And I just want to point out one thing at the bottom. This one we talked about the eligibility piece. It's in there and it just says for the 2028 budget. So we just need to keep our eyes on that. And then the other thing is this other one is our hearings. So you can go each week and look at the various hearings each day, and it'll change each week. And you can sign up for hearings. You can click right there on the links and go and sign up for a hearing. So I'm going to stop talking and get back to Sean.
Happy we do have two questions in the chat. From Heather. She said, it is on the same as a DD advocate. Do you see that one?
Let's see. Isn't an ombuds the same as a DD advocate? Yes, I said. So first of all, I did say ABLE account. Yes. And an ombuds, it's similar to a DD advocate. Yes. Okay. 5125. So that bill, the King County rate bill, is that one back again? Thank you. I'll add that to our chart.
Awesome. It's 11:26. So do you want me to play the video? Hold
Sure.
on.
Why don't you go ahead?
Okay.
Hi, I'm Sean Latham, the Policy Coordinator for Self Advocates in Leadership.
And I'm Jessica Renner from Self Advocates in Leadership.
We want to thank everyone for taking your time out today to join us for Advocacy Days. We're here to talk to you about how to become a trusted resource for legislators on issues affecting your life. Even though your elected officials represent you, they can't do this very well if they don't know what you want. We want to encourage you to contact your legislators throughout session, but especially this week, about the issues that matter to you.
That's right. With so many topics for legislators to learn about, your knowledge of developmental disabilities helps them to do their job. You are the expert in telling your story and how it relates to decisions they are making. Here are some tips to help you make the most impact. Your time with legislators, staff, or aides is short, and your message should be too. When you communicate, sum up what the issue is and why it's important to you. Have a specific request related to a bill or budget item. Attack the problem, not the person. Follow up with a thank you. By doing this, you greatly increase your credibility and strengthen your legislative relationships. Bottom line, stick to what you know, which is your life, and how the issue affects you.
Here are some ways that you can reach out to your legislators. You can email them and their legislative assistant about your priorities. You can contact them through the legislative hotline phone number, which is 1-800-562-6000, and ask to leave a message for them. You can also share your opinion on a particular bill by using the hotline. We also encourage you to request either an in-person meeting with your legislators or a meeting with them over Zoom or Microsoft Teams. Please reach out to the legislative assistant of the legislator to request a meeting. You can watch the legislature at work on TVW, either on your TV, if you have the channel, or online at tvw.org. Another way you can participate is by signing up to testify at legislative hearings. For each hearing, you can sign up for the individual bills as pro, meaning you are for the bill, con, meaning you are against the bill, or other if you have concerns with the bill you generally like.
Let me now take you through the process using the Washington State Legislative website that can be found at leg.wi.gov. On the website, under the menu, click on the menu item that states Bills, Meetings, and Session. From there, scroll down to the section titled Upcoming Committee Meetings and click on the link titled Sign into a Committee Meeting. Next, choose if you are testifying in a House hearing or testifying in a Senate hearing. We all have the choice to testify in person, testify by video remotely, or we can submit written testimony or just state what our position is on the bill.
After you pick one of the options, you will be taken to the form to register. You will need to fill out your position, your name, your email, your address, your phone number, and your organization, if you are representing one. It also asks you if you will testify on a panel or not. If you are testifying on a panel, it will ask you to fill in the names of the other panelists. The other box to make note of is the pronunciation box. If you want your name said right, you can sound it out in that box. Please check the box "I'm not a robot" at the end of the form, and then it's time to hit Submit Registration. Once you submit your registration, you will receive an email from a committee staff email address. Please read this email carefully and add the meeting to your desired calendar using the links in the email. From there, make sure you are ready to testify.
Don't forget about social media. A lot of legislators have accounts on Facebook and Twitter where you can comment or watch live stream chats and virtual town halls.
It's so important to stay informed and involved. Participate in virtual advocacy days. Sign up for the ARC of Washington's Action Alerts. Get updates at arcwa.org and follow on Facebook. Connect with local parent and self-advocate groups. And remember, change is made by those who show up.
Stop the bear. Thank you. Why more people?
Lastly, I want to encourage. This is Sean Latham again. I hope you are having a great day today and you learned a lot. This week we focused on protecting our services and our rights. I know you will all agree that the services we have, helps us be independent, and the rights we have are critical and should never be removed from us. Today's one-pager summary, directed at the legislators, state the following. We understand that this legislative session will present budgetary challenges. When you are making difficult decisions, please remember that people with I/DD depend on these crucial services to live. The state has a moral obligation to ensure this population receives the care they need. It is important to recognize that individuals with I/DD receive services from many agencies, leading to compounded impacts when cuts are implemented. Equal cuts across state agencies disproportionately affect people with I/DD. Saving money by making cuts to services will ultimately lead to more costly crises down the line. We need to ensure that our federal civil rights laws are enforced to make sure that people with disabilities are not denied services, provided unequal treatment, or relegated to segregated settings, and ensure that everyone has equal opportunities to benefit from state services and programs. My personal thoughts are that we must make it known to our legislators how important our
Sorry.
Lastly, I want to encourage you to fill out our Advocacy Day survey. This helps us understand what you like and what you didn't like about Advocacy Day, so we can get better and better. You have the option of filling out the Zoom survey that you should see on the screen now, or alternatively you can click on the links I posted in the chat. There will be an English and Spanish link. Let us know after if you need any assistance in filling out the survey. With that, I will thank everybody for coming today, especially our great speakers, and my co-facilitators Ian and Emily. A few of us will stay for a few minutes after, if people have questions, and remember, change is made by